Try to remember in real detail what happened yesterday. Not the highlights, the actual texture of the day, the specific thoughts you had during your commute, what you were feeling at 2 in the afternoon. The small decisions you made without ever consciously deciding them. For most people, that memory comes back blurry, generic, almost interchangeable with a dozen other days that have quietly folded into each other. That blur isn't a memory problem. It's a presence problem. Somewhere along the way, an enormous portion of your life started running on a program you never actually wrote, one that handles your mornings, your reactions, your choices, without ever really consulting you. I want to spend the next several minutes taking that program apart, because once you see exactly how much of your life is currently running without you, you can't unsee it. And that discomfort is precisely where waking back up actually begins. Section 1: What autopilot actually is. Autopilot isn't laziness, and understanding that distinction matters, because moralizing about it only produces guilt without producing change. Autopilot is the brain's ruthless efficiency mechanism, the same system that lets you tie your shoes without thinking, drive a familiar route without consciously navigating every turn, or hold a routine conversation while your mind is somewhere else entirely. This mechanism exists because conscious attention is expensive, metabolically costly, and limited, so the brain automates anything repeated often enough, freeing up conscious bandwidth for genuinely novel situations that actually require it. In small doses, this is a gift. It's the reason you're not exhausted by the end of breakfast. The problem isn't that autopilot exists, the problem is how much territory it quietly claims once you stop paying attention to where the boundary is. What starts as automating your morning routine gradually expands into automating your reactions in conversations, your responses to stress, your choices about how you spend an evening, until entire categories of your actual life are being run by the same efficient, unconscious system that was only ever supposed to handle shoelaces and familiar driving routes. Section 2: When autopilot starts making real decisions. Here's where this becomes genuinely serious rather than simply inconvenient. Autopilot doesn't stay confined to small, repetitive tasks. It quietly extends into decisions that actually shape the direction of your life. Because the same mechanism that automates a familiar action can also automate a familiar choice. You stay in a job not because you've consciously evaluated it against your current values and decided it's still right, but because leaving would require conscious deliberation. And staying requires none. You maintain a relationship, a routine, a way of spending your evenings, not from ongoing, active choice, but because the alternative would require the exact kind of conscious engagement autopilot was designed to help you avoid. This is how people wake up, sometimes many years into a pattern, and realize with genuine shock that they never actually chose the life they're currently living. They simply never interrupted the momentum long enough to choose anything else. The frightening part isn't that autopilot occasionally makes a bad decision, it's that autopilot doesn't make decisions in any meaningful sense at all. It simply continues whatever was already in motion indefinitely until something forces a conscious interruption. Section 3: Why time seems to speed up. There's a specific, well-documented experience tied directly to this, the sense that time accelerates as you get older, and understanding why reveals exactly how much autopilot is costing you. Your sense of how much time has passed is built largely from the density of distinct, memorable moments your mind actually registered during that period, not from the literal number of hours that elapsed. A childhood summer feels endless because nearly everything was novel, unfamiliar, requiring genuine conscious attention, and each of those attended moments left a distinct trace in memory. An adult year filled with routines your brain long ago automated produces far fewer of those distinct traces, because most of it was processed by autopilot and simply never registered as a separate, memorable event in the first place. This is why an entire year can pass and feel, in retrospect, shorter than a single genuinely novel week did in childhood, not because time itself moved differently, but because so little of that year was actually attended to consciously enough to leave a lasting impression. The acceleration you feel isn't really about time. It's a direct measurement of how much of your life recently ran without you actually present for it. Section 4. The quiet cost of days you never actually lived. Put these two things together and you arrive at something worth sitting with honestly. If autopilot is running an increasing share of your decisions and those automated periods barely register in memory at all, then a genuinely large portion of your one. Finite life can pass by functionally unlived, technically experienced, but never actually attended to, never actually chosen, never actually present for. This isn't dramatic language for effect, it's a fairly literal description of what happens when large stretches of adulthood get handed over entirely to automated routine. The cost isn't a single catastrophic event you can point to, it's cumulative, quiet, and almost invisible while it's happening. Which is exactly what makes it so easy to ignore until enough years have accumulated that the pattern becomes impossible to overlook. Most people don't confront this until something forces the interruption, a loss, a diagnosis, a genuine crisis. Something that yanks conscious attention back online all at once and forces an honest look at how much of the preceding years actually happened with anyone actually home. Section 5. You don't need a crisis to wake up. Here's the genuinely good news buried inside all of this. The interruption doesn't have to come from crisis. It can be built deliberately, on purpose, without needing to wait for something painful to force it. The mechanism that reliably interrupts autopilot is novelty. Anything sufficiently unfamiliar demands conscious processing simply because there's no automated pattern yet built for it. This is why deliberately introducing small, genuine changes into an otherwise automated routine works far better than trying to will yourself into constant, generalized mindfulness, which is exhausting and rarely sustainable for long. Take a different route occasionally. Ask a genuinely curious question in a conversation you'd normally run on autopilot. Notice, specifically and deliberately, one detail in a familiar environment you've walked past 100 times without ever actually seeing. These interruptions don't need to be large to work. The mechanism responds to novelty itself, not to the size of the disruption. Which means waking yourself up from autopilot is far more accessible than most people assume. It simply requires consistent, small, deliberate friction rather than one dramatic overhaul of your entire life. Section 6. Rebuilding the habit of actually choosing. Beyond small moments of novelty, there's a deeper practice worth building. And it involves periodically stopping to ask a direct question about decisions that have quietly been running on autopilot for a long time. Am I still in this because I've consciously chosen it recently, or because I simply never interrupted the momentum long enough to reconsider it? This question, applied honestly to a job, a relationship, a daily routine, a habit, often produces an uncomfortable but clarifying answer. Because most long-running patterns were genuinely chosen once, at the beginning, and then simply continued by default ever since, without ever being consciously reevaluated against who you've actually become since that original choice was made. Building the habit of periodically asking this question on a regular rhythm rather than only during a crisis is what actually keeps a life feeling chosen rather than simply continued. It's uncomfortable because it occasionally reveals that something needs to change, and change requires exactly the kind of conscious effort autopilot exists to help you avoid. But that discomfort is the actual price of staying present for your own life, and it's a price worth paying deliberately, rather than eventually being forced to pay it all at once years later, with considerably more regret attached. Closing, choosing to be present for your own life. The goal was never to eliminate autopilot entirely. That's neither possible nor even desirable. You'd be exhausted within a single day trying to consciously process every small, repetitive task your brain has efficiently automated for good reason. The goal is to notice exactly where the boundary of that automation has quietly expanded, and to deliberately reclaim the territory that actually matters. The decisions that shape the direction of your life, the relationships that deserve your genuine presence. The moments that are actually worth remembering rather than blurring into an indistinguishable stretch of automated time. Every day you introduce even a small amount of genuine, conscious attention into an otherwise automated life is a day that actually gets lived instead of simply processed. That's the real difference this comes down to, not how many years you have left, but how many of them you're actually going to be present for. The program is still running right now, quietly in the background, exactly as it has been. The only real question left is whether you're going to keep letting it drive or finally take the wheel back yourself.